I never thought my sister's fiancé would corner me in my own kitchen and beg me to destroy his relationship. But there Ethan was, standing between my counter and the refrigerator, his hazel eyes wild with something I'd never seen before, desperation mixed with relief. Like he'd finally found someone who might understand. "Please break us up." The words hung in the air between us like a confession. I blinked, wondering if I'd misheard him. This was the same Ethan who smiled perfectly at family dinners, who brought Sophia flowers every Friday, who seemed to worship the ground my sister walked on. The golden boy everyone loved. "What?" I managed to whisper, my coffee mug frozen halfway to my lips. Ethan ran his hands through his dark hair, messing up the usually perfect styling. "I know how this sounds, Kai. I know you must think I'm insane. But I can't breathe anymore. Every day feels like I'm drowning. And I can't hurt her directly." My omega instincts were going haywire. His scent was all wrong. Usually Ethan smelled like cedar and vanilla. Warm and comforting. Now there was something sharp underneath. Something desperate and panicked that made my stomach twist. As an omega, I was naturally sensitive to distress, but this felt different. More personal. I set my mug down carefully, buying myself time to process what he was saying. "Ethan, you and Sophia have been together for 3 years. You're getting married in 6 months. Everyone thinks you're perfect together. Everyone's wrong." His voice cracked on the words, and he leaned against my counter like he needed the support. "She's suffocating me, Kai. Every decision has to go through her. Every friend I want to see has to be approved. Every plan I make gets changed to fit what she wants. I love her. I do. But I'm disappearing." I watched him carefully, noting the way his shoulders sagged, how his usually confident posture had crumbled. Part of me wanted to comfort him. That was my nature as an omega. But another part, a darker part I didn't want to acknowledge, was thrilled by his vulnerability. "So tell her that," I said, though my voice sounded strange even to me. "Talk to her about boundaries." Ethan laughed bitterly. "You think I haven't tried? Last week I suggested maybe we could have one night a week to hang out with our own friends separately. She cried for 2 hours about how I didn't want to spend time with her. Then she planned a surprise couples weekend getaway to reconnect." He made air quotes, and I could see the frustration rolling off him in waves. I stepped closer without really thinking about it. "Why are you telling me this instead of just ending things yourself?" "Because she adores you. You're her baby brother, and she trusts your judgment more than anyone's. If you started having concerns about our relationship, if you started suggesting maybe we weren't right for each other." He trailed off, looking at me with hope that made something twist in my chest. The rational part of my brain was screaming warnings. This was my sister we were talking about. Sophia, who had raised me after our parents died, who worked 2 jobs to put me through college, who deserved happiness more than anyone I knew. But standing there in my kitchen, breathing in Ethan's distressed scent and seeing the way his eyes pleaded with me, rational thought was becoming harder to hold on to. "She'd be devastated," I said quietly. "She'd be hurt, yes. But she'd heal. And maybe she'd find someone who could love her the way she deserves, instead of someone who feels trapped." Ethan stepped closer, and I caught a whiff of his natural alpha scent underneath the desperation. It made my mouth water in a way that should have horrified me. "Ethan," I started, but he interrupted me. "I know this is crazy. I know I'm asking something terrible of you. But I'm drowning, Kai. Every day I stay in this relationship, I lose more of myself. And eventually I'm going to hurt her worse than a clean break ever would." His hand reached out, almost touching my wrist before he caught himself. The almost contact sent electricity up my arm anyway. I stared at the space between his fingers and my skin, wondering what would have happened if he'd actually touched me. "You understand, don't you?" His voice was softer now, more intimate. "You know what it's like to feel trapped by expectations." He was right, and we both knew it. I'd spent my whole life being the perfect little brother, the grateful orphan who never caused problems. I'd never told Sophia about my sexuality, never dated openly, never done anything that might disappoint the sister who'd sacrificed everything for me. In a way, we were both prisoners of the same need to be perfect for the people who loved us. "If I did this," I said slowly, "if I even considered it, what exactly would you want me to do?" Hope flickered in his eyes. "Nothing dramatic. Just start having doubts. Mention that you've noticed some incompatibilities. Ask her if she's really happy or if she just thinks she should be. Plant seeds. And what about you? What would you be doing while I'm supposedly sabotaging your relationship? Being the perfect fiancé, like always. Right up until she realizes we're wrong for each other and ends things herself. He paused, studying my face. She'd never blame you for making her think. She'd thank you for caring enough to ask the hard questions. I wanted to say no. Every decent instinct I had was telling me to refuse, to tell Ethan to handle his own problems like an adult. But as I really looked at him, I saw something that made my breath catch. He was beautiful in his desperation. His usually perfect facade had cracked, and underneath was something raw and real that called to every suppressed instinct I'd been ignoring for years. Ethan wasn't just asking me to break up his relationship. He was asking me to save him, and maybe, in the process, I could save myself too. I need time to think about this, I said finally. Relief flooded his features. Thank you. Just, thank you for considering it. I'm not promising anything. I know, but you're the first person who's listened, who's understood. That means everything. After he left, I stood in my kitchen for a long time, staring at the spot where he'd been standing. His scent lingered, that distressed alpha smell that shouldn't have been attractive but somehow was. I pressed my fingers to my wrist where he'd almost touched me, wondering if I was losing my mind. But as I replayed the conversation, one thing became crystal clear. I wasn't going to help Ethan break up with my sister. I was going to steal him from her. The thought should have filled me with guilt. But instead, it filled me with a dark thrill I'd never experienced before. For the first time in my life, I was going to stop being the perfect little brother and take something I wanted, even if it destroyed everything in the process. 2 days after Ethan's desperate kitchen confession, I found myself standing in front of my bathroom mirror preparing for Sophia's 26th birthday party. The red silk shirt I'd chosen clung to my torso in all the right places, and the black jeans were tight enough to be interesting without being obvious. I looked good, and more importantly, I looked like someone worth noticing. My reflection stared back at me with eyes I barely recognized. When had I become someone who would seduce their sister's fiancé? When had I decided that what I wanted mattered more than Sophia's happiness? But as I ran my fingers through my dark hair one final time, I realized I didn't care about the answers to those questions. All I cared about was the way Ethan's eyes had looked at me in the kitchen, desperate, grateful, and something else I wanted to explore. I arrived at Sophia's apartment fashionably late, my heart pounding with anticipation and guilt in equal measure. The party was already in full swing, filled with her coworkers and college friends, everyone laughing and drinking wine while soft music played in the background. It was exactly the kind of tasteful, controlled gathering Sophia excelled at organizing. Kai! Her face lit up when she saw me, and the spike of guilt in my chest almost made me turn around and leave. She looked beautiful in a flowing blue dress, her blonde hair swept up in an elegant bun, her smile genuine and warm. This was my sister, who had given up her own dreams to raise me, who deserved every happiness in the world. But then I saw Ethan across the room and my resolve solidified. He was talking to one of Sophia's work friends, nodding politely and smiling in that perfect way of his. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers gripped his beer bottle just a little too tightly. When his eyes found mine across the crowded living room, his entire body went still. Our gazes locked for a moment that felt eternal, and I saw his pupils dilate slightly before he forced himself to look away. Good. He was already affected, and I hadn't even started yet. Sorry I'm late, I told Sophia, pressing a kiss to her cheek. Work ran over. You're here now. That's what matters. She squeezed my arm affectionately. Come get a drink. Ethan made his famous sangria. Perfect. I followed her to the kitchen, very aware of how the silk shirt moved against my skin, how the fitted jeans hugged my legs. I was dressed to be noticed, and from the way several party guests glanced at me approvingly, it was working. Ethan was refilling the sangria pitcher when we approached, and I watched his hands still slightly when he heard my voice thanking Sophia for the invitation. He turned around slowly, and I had the satisfaction of seeing his breath catch when he took in my appearance. Hey Ethan, I said casually, accepting the glass he handed me. Our fingers brushed during the exchange, Just for a second, but it was enough to send electricity shooting up my arm. From the way he quickly pulled his hand back, I knew he felt it too. Kai, you look. He cleared his throat, glancing nervously at Sophia. Nice. You look nice. Thank you. I took a sip of the sangria, letting my lips linger on the rim of the glass just a beat longer than necessary. This is delicious. You'll have to teach me how to make it sometime. There was nothing inappropriate about the words, but I let my voice carry just enough suggestion to make them sound like something else entirely. Ethan's eyes darkened, and he took a large gulp of his own drink. Maybe, he said, his voice slightly rough. Sophia, oblivious to the undercurrents, beamed at both of us. Isn't he amazing? I'm so lucky. She wrapped her arms around Ethan's waist, and I watched him force a smile as he hugged her back. The sight should have stopped me cold. My sister was radiant with happiness, secure in her relationship, planning a future with the man she loved. But instead of guilt, I felt a dark thrill of competition. She had him now, but that was about to change. Over the next hour, I began my campaign in earnest. Every interaction with Ethan was carefully calculated. When I helped serve appetizers, I made sure to brush against him as I moved around the kitchen. When we ended up near each other during conversations, I stood just a little too close, letting my scent surround him. The beautiful thing about being an omega was that my natural pheromones were designed to be appealing to alphas. Usually, I suppressed them out of politeness, but tonight I let them flow freely. I watched Ethan's nostrils flare slightly whenever he was near me, saw the way his eyes kept drifting to my mouth when I spoke. Kai, come sit with us. Sophia called from the couch, patting the cushion beside her. The main group had settled into the living room for what looked like an intimate conversation about relationships and future plans. Exactly the kind of topic I could use to my advantage. I settled onto the couch, deliberately choosing the spot that would put me directly across from Ethan. He was squeezed into an armchair with Sophia perched on the arm, her hand resting possessively on his shoulder. But his eyes kept finding mine across the small space. We were just talking about the wedding, Sophia said excitedly. Only 6 months left. I can't believe how fast it's approaching. It'll be here before you know it, agreed one of her friends. Are you excited, Ethan? I watched him carefully as he answered, noting the slight delay, the way he had to force enthusiasm into his voice. Of course. It's going to be a beautiful day. Kai, you're going to be Ethan's best man, right? Another friend asked. Actually, Sophia interjected, we haven't decided on the wedding party yet. There are so many people to consider. I seized the opening. I'd be honored if you asked me, I said, looking directly at Ethan. I want to support you both in whatever way I can. The words were innocent enough, but I let my gaze linger on Ethan's face as I spoke them. I saw him swallow hard, saw the way his grip tightened on his beer bottle. That's so sweet of you, Sophia said, completely missing the tension crackling between her fiancé and her brother. As the conversation moved on to other topics, I continued my subtle assault on Ethan's composure. When I laughed at something funny, I let the sound be genuinely warm and inviting. When I told a story about work, I made sure to be charming and animated, drawing everyone's attention. But most importantly, I made sure Ethan knew that all of it was for him. The breakthrough moment came when I offered to help clean up. Most of the guests had left, and Sophia was saying goodbye to the last few stragglers at the door. Ethan and I were alone in the kitchen, loading dishes into the dishwasher. Thank you for considering what we talked about, he said quietly, handing me a plate to rinse. Considering it? I repeated, moving closer under the pretense of reaching for another dish. I'm doing more than considering it, Ethan. He froze, a wine glass halfway to the sink. What do you mean? I turned to face him fully, close enough that he would be able to smell my scent clearly. I mean, I've been watching you tonight. Watching how you force yourself to smile. How you tense up every time mentions the wedding. You weren't lying about feeling trapped. Kai, his voice was warning, but his body was saying something else entirely. He was leaning toward me instead of away, his breathing slightly uneven. You asked for my help, I continued, letting my voice drop to a whisper. And I'm giving it to you. Just maybe not in the way you expected. Before he could ask what I meant, Sophia's voice drifted in from the living room. Babe, can you help me move this table back? Ethan's eyes widened as if he was just realizing how close we were standing. how intimate our conversation had become. He stepped back quickly, but not before I saw the conflict in his eyes: confusion, attraction, and something that looked dangerously like want. "Coming," he called back to Sophia, his voice slightly strained. As he walked away, I smiled to myself. The seed was planted. Tonight had been about showing Ethan what he could have if he was brave enough to take it. The way he'd responded to my proximity, the way his body had betrayed his interest despite his obvious internal conflict. It all confirmed what I'd suspected in my kitchen 2 days ago. Ethan wanted me just as much as I wanted him. He just didn't know it yet, but he would soon. The coffee shop I'd chosen for my meeting with Ethan was deliberately intimate. Small tables, dim lighting, the kind of place where conversations felt more personal than they should. I arrived early, selecting a corner booth that would give us privacy while still being public enough to maintain the pretense that this was just an innocent discussion between future family members. My outfit was carefully calculated again. Dark jeans that showed off my legs, a fitted sweater in deep green that I knew brought out my eyes, and just enough cologne to be noticeable without being obvious. I wanted to look approachable, trustworthy, like the concerned little brother who was just trying to help. The lie felt smoother on my skin than it should have. Ethan arrived exactly on time, looking harried and nervous. His usually perfect hair was slightly mussed, and there were shadows under his eyes that suggested he hadn't been sleeping well. Good, that meant he'd been thinking about our kitchen conversation, about the birthday party, about the slowly shifting dynamic between us. "Thank you for meeting me," he said as he slid into the booth across from me, his coffee cup trembling slightly in his hands. "Of course. I said I'd help, didn't I?" I leaned back in my seat, projecting calm confidence while studying his face. "You look tired. How are things at home?" Ethan's laugh was bitter. "Complicated. Sophia's been planning wedding details nonstop. Yesterday she showed me 17 different centerpiece options and got upset when I couldn't tell the difference between ivory and cream." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." He rubbed his forehead, and I noticed how his fingers lingered at his temples like he was fighting a headache. "I keep thinking about what you said at the party. About watching me. About seeing how trapped I look. Do you really see it that clearly?" This was my opening. I leaned forward slightly, letting concern color my voice. "Ethan, you looked miserable. Every time someone mentioned the wedding, you tensed up like you were bracing for impact. And when Sophia was talking about your honeymoon plans," I shook my head sadly. "It was like watching someone discuss their own execution." "Jesus." He buried his face in his hands. "If it's that obvious to you, how is Sophia not seeing it?" "Because she doesn't want to see it. She's so caught up in the fairy tale that she's not paying attention to the prince." I paused, letting that sink in. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "That's why I asked for your help. I've tried talking to her about slowing down, about maybe postponing the wedding, but she just assumes I'm having normal pre-wedding jitters. She keeps saying all grooms get nervous, and then she plans something else to help us reconnect." I nodded sympathetically while my foot found his leg under the table. The contact was light, almost accidental, but I saw him stiffen. "Have you considered that maybe the problem isn't the wedding timeline? Maybe the problem is deeper than that?" "What do you mean?" But his voice suggested he knew exactly what I meant. "Maybe you and Sophia just aren't compatible in the ways that matter." I let my foot trace a small pattern against his calf, watching his pupils dilate slightly. "Maybe you need someone who understands you better." "Kai?" His voice was strained, but he didn't pull his leg away. "We can't talk about this." "Why not? Because it makes you uncomfortable? Or because it makes too much sense?" Instead of answering, he took a large gulp of his coffee, using the movement as an excuse to shift in his seat. But instead of moving away from my foot, he somehow ended up closer. "Interesting. I tried to break up with her 6 months ago," he admitted suddenly. "Right after she started talking about wedding venues. I couldn't handle the pressure. Couldn't handle feeling like my entire future was being decided without my input. So I sat her down and tried to explain that I needed space to figure things out." "What happened?" "She cried for 3 hours. Then she called you, actually sobbing about how I was having commitment issues, and she didn't know what to do." "Do you remember that night?" I did remember. Sophia had shown up at my apartment devastated, convinced that Ethan was going to leave her. I'd spent the entire evening reassuring her, telling her that Ethan loved her and that all couples went through rough patches. The irony wasn't lost on me now. She was heartbroken, I said carefully, and I felt like a monster. She kept saying she'd die without me, that I was her whole world, that she'd never love anyone the way she loved me. How do you break up with someone who says things like that? How do you destroy someone who's made you their entire reason for existing? His anguish was genuine, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered the way he'd looked at me at the party, the way his body was responding to mine right now, and my sympathy evaporated. Ethan wasn't just trapped by Sophia's dependence. He was attracted to me whether he wanted to admit it or not. So you stayed out of guilt, I observed. I stayed because I love her. Just not. He stopped himself, but I knew what he'd been about to say. Not the way she loves you. I finished softly. He nodded miserably. I keep thinking that maybe if I try harder, if I'm a better fiancé, if I focus on her good qualities and stop being so selfish, then I'll feel what I'm supposed to feel. But it's been 3 years and I'm still waiting for that lightning bolt, that sense of this is my person, that everyone talks about. This was perfect. Better than I could have hoped for. I leaned forward, closing more of the distance between us, and let my voice drop to an intimate whisper. Can I ask you something personal? He nodded, though his eyes were wary. When you imagine your future, not the wedding, not the plans Sophia's made, but your actual future, do you see yourself happy? The question hung between us like a challenge. I watched him struggle with it, watched the careful walls he'd built around his feelings start to crumble. No, he whispered finally. I see myself going through the motions. Being a good husband, maybe a good father someday, but never feeling alive. Never feeling like myself. And what would make you feel alive? The question was loaded and we both knew it. I let my hand drift across the table, not quite touching his fingers but close enough that the space between us felt charged. His eyes followed the movements, and I saw him swallow hard. I don't know, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I think you do know. I think you're just afraid to admit it. Now I did touch him. Just the lightest brush of my fingertips against his knuckles. The contact lasted maybe 2 seconds, but it was enough to make his breath hitch. Kai, we can't what? Can't acknowledge that you're attracted to me? Can't admit that there's something between us that you've never felt with Sophia? His eyes went wide with shock and he pulled his hand back like I'd burned him. That's not I never said. You didn't have to say it. Your body says it for you. I kept my voice gentle, non-threatening. But the words hit him like physical blows. The way you looked at me at the party, the way you're responding to me now. You can lie to yourself, Ethan, but you can't lie to me. You're Sophia's brother, he said desperately. Even if what you're suggesting was true, which it's not, I would never act on it. I'm not that kind of person. What kind of person? The kind who's honest about their feelings. The kind who chooses happiness over obligation. I shook my head sadly. You asked me to help you get out of this relationship, and I'm trying to show you why you should want out. It's not just about feeling trapped by Sophia, it's about feeling trapped by who you think you're supposed to be. He stared at me for a long moment, conflict written across every line of his face. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. This is insane. Is it? Or is it the first honest conversation you've had about your relationship in months? Before he could answer, my phone buzzed with a text. I glanced at it and felt a thrill of dark satisfaction. Sophia's asking where you are, I said, showing him the screen. She says you were supposed to go cake tasting an hour ago. The color drained from Ethan's face. Shit, I completely forgot. See what I mean? You're so miserable that you're forgetting the things that are supposed to make you happy. I stood up, pulling on my jacket. Think about what I said, Ethan. Think about what you really want, not what everyone expects you to want. I started to walk away, but his voice stopped me. Kai. When I turned back, his eyes were desperate again. But this time the desperation looked different, hungrier. If things were different, if I wasn't with Sophia. But you are with Sophia, I said gently. The question is, do you want to be? I left him sitting there, staring after me with confusion and want written all over his face. As I walked to my car, I couldn't stop smiling. The conversation had gone even better than I'd hoped. I'd planted seeds of doubt about his relationship. confirmed his attraction to me and left him with a choice that would consume his thoughts for days. Phase 1 of stealing my sister's fiancé was complete. Now came the real test, making him want me more than he feared losing everything else. The weekend family barbecue was the perfect opportunity for my final move, and I'd prepared for it like a general preparing for war. The tight white tank top I'd chosen clung to my torso in all the right places, showing off the lean muscle I'd developed from months of careful gym sessions. The navy swim shorts were short enough to be interesting without being obvious, and I'd spent extra time in the mirror making sure everything looked effortlessly perfect. Casual but irresistible. That was the goal. Our parents' old house still felt like home, even though Sophia and I had both moved out years ago. The backyard was filled with extended family friends, and neighbors, all enjoying the perfect summer weather and my aunt's famous potato salad. It was the kind of wholesome gathering that should have made me feel guilty about my plans, but instead I felt nothing but anticipation. I found Ethan by the pool, helping my uncle set up the volleyball net. He was wearing a simple gray t-shirt and khaki shorts. Nothing special, but somehow he made casual clothes look like a magazine spread. When he bent over to secure one of the net poles, I caught myself staring at the way his shirt stretched across his broad shoulders. "Need any help?" I asked, approaching with 2 beers from the cooler. He straightened up and turned around, and I had the satisfaction of watching his eyes widen slightly as he took in my appearance. His gaze lingered on my chest for just a moment too long before he caught himself and looked away. "Thanks," he said, accepting the beer with hands that weren't quite steady. "Your uncle's got very specific ideas about proper net tension. He's always been a perfectionist." I took a sip of my beer, letting the condensation from the bottle drip onto my chest. It was a subtle move, but I saw Ethan's eyes track the droplets as they rolled down my skin. "How are you holding up? You look stressed." "Just the usual wedding planning chaos," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Sophia's mother has opinions about everything from the flowers to the font on the invitations. Sounds overwhelming." I stepped closer, ostensibly to help him adjust the net, but really to let my sense surround him. "You know, if you ever need to talk about any of it, I'm here. I know I'm just the little brother, but sometimes an outside perspective helps." His hands stilled on the rope he was tying. "Kai, what?" "I'm just saying you don't have to carry everything alone." I let my shoulder brush against his arm as I reached for the other end of the net. Family looks out for family, right? The contact was brief but electric. I felt him tense, saw his breathing change slightly. We were playing a dangerous game and we both knew it, but neither of us was backing down. "Boys, come eat." My aunt's voice carried across the yard, breaking the moments. Ethan stepped back quickly, looking both relieved and disappointed. Lunch was a masterclass in subtle torture. I made sure to sit where I could see Ethan clearly, and every time our eyes met across the table, I let mine linger just a beat too long. When he laughed at one of my uncle's jokes, I found myself staring at his mouth. When he reached for the salt, I made sure our fingers brushed during the handoff. Sophia, sitting beside him, was oblivious to the tension crackling between us. She was in her element, chatting with relatives, planning future family gatherings, playing the perfect hostess. She looked beautiful and happy, completely unaware that her fiancé was slowly being pulled into my orbit. After lunch, most of the family settled into lawn chairs or started a card game on the porch. It was the perfect time for phase 2 of my plan. I caught Ethan's eye and tilted my head toward the garage, then slipped away as casually as possible. The garage was dim and quiet, filled with the comfortable chaos of family storage, holiday decorations, old furniture, boxes of memories. It smelled like motor oil and sawdust, a stark contrast to the floral perfection of the backyard party. I positioned myself near the workbench, where the afternoon light filtering through the dusty window would hit me at the perfect angle. I didn't have to wait long. Ethan appeared in the doorway within minutes, looking around nervously before stepping inside and closing the door behind him. "We need to talk," he said, but his voice lacked the authority he was probably aiming for. "I was hoping you'd say that." I turned to face him fully, letting the light play across my skin. "How much more of this can you take?" "How much more of what?" "Pretending. Living a lie. Going through the motions of a relationship that's slowly killing you inside." I took a step closer and he didn't back away. It's been a week since our coffee date, and you look worse every day. It wasn't a date, he said weakly. Wasn't it? 'Cause it felt like one to me. The way you kept looking at my mouth when I talked. The way you responded when I touched your hand. Another step closer. We were close enough now that I could see the conflict in his hazel eyes. The way you're looking at me right now. Kai, stop. But even as he said it, his eyes were roaming over my body, taking in the tank top, the exposed skin, the way the dim light played across my features. Stop what? Stop telling you the truth? Stop pointing out that you're miserable with my sister? Stop acknowledging that there's something between us that you can't ignore anymore. There's nothing between us, he said, but he took a step closer as he said it, contradicting his own words. Liar. I reached out and placed my hand flat against his chest, feeling his heart race under my palm. Your body tells a different story. He grabbed my wrist, probably intending to push me away, but instead his fingers just tightened around my skin. We stood there frozen, the air between us charged with months of building tension. This is wrong, he whispered, but he didn't let go of my wrist. Why? Because Sophia's my sister? Because you're supposed to marry her? Or because you're scared of admitting that you want someone different? All of the above. His voice was rough with emotion, and I could see the war being fought behind his eyes. What if I told you that Sophia's been having doubts too? I lied smoothly, watching his expression change. What if I told you that she's mentioned to me how different you've been lately? How She said that? She's not stupid, Ethan. She can feel you pulling away, even if she doesn't understand why. I moved closer until there were only inches between us. Maybe this is the universe's way of telling you both that you're settling for the wrong person. And what? You think you're the right person? But there was no mockery in his voice. Only desperate curiosity. I think I'm the person who understands you. I think I'm the person who makes your pulse race and your breath catch. I think I'm the person you think about when you're lying in bed next to my sister, wishing you were somewhere else. His grip on my wrist tightened. How do you know that? Because I think about you too. The confession hung between us like a live wire. I think about what it would feel like to kiss you, to touch you, to be the person you turn to when you need comfort instead of obligation. Jesus, Kai. His other hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing across my cheekbone. Do you have any idea what you're doing to me? The same thing you're doing to me. I leaned into his touch, letting my eyes flutter closed for just a moment. The same thing we've been doing to each other since that day in my kitchen. When I opened my eyes again, his face was inches from mine. I could feel his breath on my lips, could smell the beer and something uniquely him that made my head spin. We can't, he whispered, but he didn't move away. We can. We just have to be brave enough to take what we want. For a moment I thought he was going to kiss me. His eyes dropped to my lips. His hand tightened on my face and I felt him lean closer. But at the last second he pulled back, dropping his hands and stepping away like I'd burned him. No, this is insane. You're Sophia's brother. She loves me and I care about her. I won't destroy her like this. You're destroying her anyway, I pointed out. Every day you stay with her while wanting someone else is a lie. At least this way she'd know the truth. The truth? He laughed bitterly. What truth? That I'm attracted to her brother. That I'm apparently the kind of person who would betray someone who loves me. The truth that you deserve to be happy. The truth that love isn't supposed to feel like a prison sentence. I reached for him again, but he backed toward the door. I have to go. This was a mistake. Ethan. Wait. But he was already gone, leaving me alone in the garage with the smell of motor oil and the lingering scent of his cologne. I stood there for a long moment, processing what had just happened. He'd almost kissed me. For a split second he'd forgotten about Sophia, forgotten about his obligations, forgotten about everything except the magnetic pull between us. It wasn't a victory yet, but it wasn't a defeat either. I'd cracked his resolve, shown him a glimpse of what we could have together. And judging by the way he'd looked at me, the way he'd touched my face, the way his whole body had responded to my proximity, I knew he'd be thinking about it for days. The seed was planted. Now I just had to be patient while it grew. The week following the garage incident was torture, but not in the way I'd expected. Instead of pursuing me or giving in to the attraction I knew he felt, Ethan did the opposite. He threw himself into being the perfect fiancé with an almost manic intensity that was painful to watch. Suddenly he was bringing Sophia flowers every day. He was enthusiastically participating in wedding planning sessions that used to make him visibly tense. He was posting couple photos on social media with captions about how lucky he was, how excited he was for their future together. To anyone watching from the outside, it looked like a man who had remembered how much he loved his fiancée. But I could see the cracks in his performance. The way his smile never quite reached his eyes in those photos. The slight delay before he responded to Sophia's affection. The way he gripped his coffee cup too tightly during their morning routine, like he was holding on to his sanity by sheer force of will. He was overcompensating, and we both knew it. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening when Sophia called me, her voice bright with excitement. "Kai, you have to come over for dinner tomorrow night. Ethan's cooking that salmon dish you love, and I have the most amazing news to share." My stomach dropped. "What kind of news?" "I can't tell you over the phone. It's too big. Just promise me you'll be here at 7? I promised, even though every instinct I had was screaming warnings. Whatever news Sophia was excited to share, I had a feeling it wasn't going to be good for my carefully laid plans. The next evening, I arrived at their shared apartment with a bottle of wine and a sense of impending doom. Sophia answered the door practically glowing with happiness. Her blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing a new dress I'd never seen before. "You look nice," I said, kissing her cheek. "Special occasion? You could say that." She was practically bouncing on her toes. "Come on, Ethan's in the kitchen putting the finishing touches on dinner." I followed her into their cozy apartment, noting the fresh flowers on every surface, the candles already lit, the way everything looked like a magazine spread. It was beautiful and romantic and felt completely wrong. Ethan looked up from the stove when we entered, and I saw him freeze for just a moment when his eyes met mine. He'd been avoiding me for a week, declining family gatherings, ignoring my texts, pretending our garage conversation had never happened. But seeing me in person clearly rattled him. "Hey Kai," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Thanks for coming. Thanks for cooking, it smells incredible in here." We managed to make it through dinner with relatively normal conversation. Though I was hyper-aware of every glance, every careful avoidance of eye contact, every moment when Ethan's voice got slightly strained. Sophia chattered happily about work, about wedding plans, about their recent trip to look at venues, seemingly oblivious to the tension radiating from her fiancé. Finally, as we were finishing dessert, she couldn't contain her excitement any longer. "Okay, I can't wait anymore." She reached across the table and grabbed Ethan's hand, her engagement ring catching the candlelight. "We have an announcement." My blood turned to ice. "No. Please, not what I thought this was. We've moved up the wedding dates." Sophia practically squealed. "Instead of waiting until December, we're getting married next month." The wine glass in my hand nearly slipped. "Next month? That's really soon." "I know, right? It's crazy, but Ethan suggested it. And once we started talking about it, we realized there's no reason to wait. We love each other, we're ready to start our lives lever, so why put it off?" I forced myself to look at Ethan, who was staring at his dessert plate like it held the secrets of the universe. His face was perfectly composed, but I could see the muscle ticking in his jaw, the way his free hand was clenched into a fist on the table. Congratulations." I managed. "What brought this on?" "Ethan did." Sophia beamed at him adoringly. "He said he didn't want to waste another day not being married to me. Isn't that romantic?" "Romantic. Right. Or it was the desperate act of a man who thought that legally binding himself to my sister might kill whatever he was feeling for me. The ultimate act of self-sabotage disguised as romantic gesture." "Very romantic," I agreed, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. "Ethan, you must be excited." Finally he looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes made my chest tight. Not excitement. Not happiness. Resignation. And underneath that, a desperate kind of panic that he was trying very hard to hide. "Thrilled," he said, the word coming out slightly rough. "The only problem is we have so much to do in such little time." Sophia continued, completely missing the undercurrents in the room. "The venue had a cancellation, which is how we got the date, but now we have to rush everything else. Invitations, flowers, catering, dress alterations. She launched into a detailed list of wedding tasks, and I watched Ethan's face grow paler with each item. This wasn't what he wanted. This was him trying to force himself into a life that was slowly suffocating him, and in a month it would be too late to escape. I should probably head home, I said when Sophia finally paused for breath. Let you two get back to planning. Oh, but we haven't talked about your role in the wedding yet, Sophia protested. With the rush timeline, we need to figure out the wedding party quickly. Actually, Ethan said suddenly, his voice sharp, maybe we should keep the wedding party small. Just immediate family. Sophia looked hurt. But Kai is immediate family. He's my brother. Of course, I just meant, with the time constraints. I understand, I said quickly, standing up. Whatever works best for you both. Ethan's eyes met mine across the table, and I saw a flash of something that looked like gratitude mixed with regret. He knew what he was doing. Cutting me out of the wedding was his way of trying to minimize the temptation, minimize the opportunities for us to be alone together. Smart man. Too bad it wouldn't work. I'll walk you out, he said, standing up as well. Oh, that's okay, I started, but he was already moving toward the door. I need some air anyway. We walked in silence to my car, the evening air cool against my skin. I could feel the tension radiating from him, could practically hear the war being waged in his head. When we reached my car, he finally spoke. Don't, he said quietly. Don't what? Whatever you're thinking, whatever you're planning, don't. I'm marrying her in a month, Kai. This ends here. I turned to face him fully, noting the shadows under his eyes, the way his hands were shaking slightly. Is this really what you want? A rushed wedding to a woman you're not in love with, just to avoid dealing with your feelings? My feelings don't matter. I made a commitment to Sophia and I'm going to honor it. Even if it destroys you both. It won't destroy us. We'll be fine. We'll be happy. Liar. I stepped closer, and he automatically stepped back, his shoulder blades hitting my car. You'll be miserable. You'll spend the rest of your life wondering what if, wishing you'd been brave enough to choose happiness over obligation. Stop, he whispered, but his eyes were fixed on my mouth. I won't stop. Not when I know you feel this too. Not when I know you think about me the way I think about you. Kai. My name came out like a prayer and I saw his resolve crumbling in real time. 1 month, I said softly. You're asking me to let you make the biggest mistake of your life, and just stand by and watch. You're asking me to pretend that what's between us doesn't exist. There's nothing between us. Then prove it. I placed my hand on his chest, feeling his heart hammering against his ribs. Kiss me. And if you feel nothing, I'll walk away. I'll never mention this again. I'll smile at your wedding and I'll pretend to be happy for you both. His breathing was ragged now, his eyes dark with want and conflict. And if I don't feel nothing, then you'll know that marrying my sister is the wrong choice for everyone involved. For a moment I thought he was going to take the challenge. His hand came up to cover mine on his chest. His eyes dropped to my lips and I felt him lean slightly forward. But at the last second, he stepped sideways, breaking the contact between us. I can't. I won't. This conversation is over, Kai. He was already walking back toward the apartment, his shoulders rigid with determination. But I wasn't worried. If anything, I was more confident than ever. The way he'd looked at me, the way his body had responded, the way he'd almost given in, all of it confirmed what I already knew. Ethan was fighting a losing battle, and in a month he'd be legally bound to the wrong person. Unless, of course, something happened to change his mind before then. I smiled as I got into my car. 1 month was plenty of time. The morning of Sophia's wedding dawned gray and drizzling, which felt appropriate given the circumstances. I'd spent the past month watching Ethan become a shell of himself, throwing himself into wedding preparations with the enthusiasm of a man walking to his execution. Every family gathering, every planning session, every moment I saw them together, felt like watching a slow-motion car crash. But I'd kept my distance, just like he'd asked. No more subtle touches, no more loaded conversations, no more attempts at seduction. I let him think he'd won, let him believe that his desperate attempt to rush into marriage had scared me off. It was better this way. By the time he realized his mistake, it would be too late to back out without causing a scandal. Or so I thought. I was getting dressed for the ceremony when my phone rang. Sophia's name flashed on the screen, and for a moment I considered not answering. I wasn't sure I could fake enthusiasm for her wedding day. Wasn't sure I could pretend to be the supportive brother she deserved. But guilt won out, as it always did when it came to Sophia. "Hey sis, shouldn't you be getting ready? The ceremony starts in 3 hours. Kai." Her voice was strange, not excited or nervous like I'd expected, but calm in a way that immediately put me on edge. "I need you to come over. Now, is everything okay? Did something happen with the flowers? The catering? Just come, please. And Kai?" She paused, and I heard her take a shaky breath. "Bring Ethan's favorite coffee, the expensive stuff from that place downtown." The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone in confusion. Why would she want me to bring coffee for her groom on their wedding day? And why did she sound so resigned? 20 minutes later, I stood outside her apartment door, with a bag containing 3 cups of artisanal coffee and a growing sense of dread. Sophia answered on the first knock, still in her pajamas, her hair in a messy bun, her face bare of makeup. She looked nothing like a bride preparing for the happiest day of her life. "Thank you for coming," she said, stepping aside to let me enter. "And thank you for the coffee. I think we're all going to need it." I looked around the living room, noting the wedding dress hanging untouched on the bedroom door, the shoes still in their box, the general absence of bridal chaos I'd expected to find. "Ethan's here," Sophia said simply. "He's been here since 5 this morning. On your wedding day? Isn't that bad luck or something?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I think we're past worrying about luck at this point. Before I could ask what she meant, Ethan appeared in the kitchen doorway. He looked terrible, unshaven, wearing yesterday's clothes, his hair sticking up like he'd been running his hands through it all night. When he saw me, something flickered across his face that might have been relief. "Kai. Thank God. Okay, what's going on?" I looked between them, noting the careful distance they were maintaining, the way they weren't quite meeting each other's eyes. "Why does this feel like an intervention instead of wedding day prep?" "Because it is an intervention," Sophia said calmly. "Sit down." I remained standing, every instinct I had screaming warnings. "Sophia, what?" "Sit down." Her voice carried an authority I'd never heard before. The voice of the woman who'd raised me after our parents died, who'd made impossible decisions and sacrificed her own dreams for my future. I sat. Sophia settled across from me while Ethan remained hovering in the doorway like he was ready to bolt. She was quiet for a long moment, studying my face with an expression I couldn't read. "How long have you been in love with my fiancé?" she asked finally. The question hit me like a physical blow. I felt the blood drain from my face, felt my carefully constructed facade crumble in real time. "What?" "It's a simple question, Kai. How long have you been in love with Ethan?" I looked at Ethan, hoping for some sign of what had happened, what had been said, but he was staring at his feet like they held the answers to the universe. "Sophia, I don't know what you think you know, but I know that you've been trying to seduce him for months," she said conversationally, like she was discussing the weather. "I know that you've been using his unhappiness in our relationship to get for him. I know that you've been playing psychological games designed to make him question everything about us." My mouth opened and closed soundlessly. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. "I also know," she continued, "that it's working." "Sophia." Ethan's voice was rough with emotion. "Let me finish." She held up a hand without looking at him. "I know that you're both miserable. I know that he's been forcing himself to go through with this wedding out of some misguided sense of obligation. And I know that you've been torturing yourself trying to respect boundaries that shouldn't exist in the first place." "How?" I whispered. "How do you know all this?" She smiled sadly. "Because I'm not blind, Kai. And because I've been waiting for one of you to be brave enough to tell me the truth." The silence that followed was deafening. I stared at my sister, trying to process what she was saying, trying to understand how my careful manipulation had been so transparent to the one person I thought I was protecting. "You've been waiting?" Ethan asked, speaking for the first time since I'd arrived. "For months," Sophia confirmed. "Ever since that family barbecue when you both came back from the garage looking like you'd seen ghosts. Or maybe it was earlier than that. Maybe it was the birthday party when Kai couldn't stop staring at you and you couldn't stop responding to it." I felt sick. "Sophia, I'm sorry. I never meant for what?" For falling in love? For recognizing that Ethan and I are wrong for each other? For seeing what I've been too scared to admit? What do you mean? Ethan stepped closer, his voice careful. Sophia looked at him with something that might have been fondness mixed with sadness. I mean that I've known for a long time that you don't love me the way I love you. I mean that I've been holding on to this relationship out of fear and stubbornness rather than genuine happiness. That's not true, Ethan protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? When was the last time you kissed me without me initiating it? When was the last time you seemed genuinely excited about our future together instead of just resigned to it? She shook her head. I've been so busy trying to force us to work that I forgot to ask whether we should work. I found my voice finally. So what happens now? Now, Sophia said, standing up and smoothing down her pajamas. I'm going to call our families and tell them the wedding is off. I'm going to return the dress and cancel the flowers and deal with all the logistics of undoing a wedding that should never have been planned in the first place. Sophia, you don't have to, Ethan started. Yes, I do. Because I deserve someone who loves me completely, and you deserve to be with the person who makes your eyes light up the way they do when you look at my brother. The words hung in the air between us, final and irreversible. I looked at Ethan, seeing the shock and relief warring on his face, the way his shoulders seemed to relax for the first time in months. Are you angry? I asked Sophia quietly. Do you hate me? She was quiet for a long moment, considering the question seriously. I should be angry. Part of me is angry. But mostly I'm relieved. And grateful. Grateful? Grateful that you cared enough about all of us to be willing to be the villain in this story. Grateful that Ethan had someone fighting for his happiness when he wasn't brave enough to fight for it himself. Grateful that I'm finding out now instead of after years of a marriage that would have made us all miserable. She walked over to me and cupped my face in her hands, the way she used to when I was little and scared. I love you, Kai. You're my brother, and that will never change. But I won't stand in the way of your happiness, and I won't let you stand in the way of mine. 3 months later, the three of us sat around a different table in a different context. Sophia was glowing with the kind of happiness I'd never seen from her before, talking excitedly about the teacher she'd started dating. Ethan was holding my hand under the table, no longer hiding what we meant to each other. To new beginnings, Sophia said, raising her wine glass. To honest endings, Ethan added. To family, I finished, looking at both of them. We drank, and I realized that sometimes the most selfish thing you can do turns out to be the most selfless thing for everyone involved. Sometimes manipulation leads to truth. Sometimes breaking things apart is the only way to put them back together correctly. And sometimes getting exactly what you want means giving everyone else what they need.